This is Jilliana Ranicar-Breese. This is part 2 of my conversation with David Benedictus. Now, David, tell me something about your heritage, your background, because the family had a very famous department store called Lillywhites, which was an institution. Tell me how that happened.
The shop was founded, I gather, by my great uncle, who opened it in Sloane Street. It then moved to Piccadilly Circus. The only shop in Piccadilly Circus was Swan and Edgar's at the time.
Yes.
Swan and Edgar's used to be famous because it was where you could meet people without any fear of being hustled. And it became quite successful because in the 1950s, or in the 1930s onwards really, winter sports became very fashionable.
Yes, sports, I remember.
Everyone went skiing and skating and ice dancing and all those things. And so Lillywhites was making a great success out of featuring all the things you need if you're going on a winter sports holiday. They covered all sports, and my father was quite happy to use sportsmen out of season to serve as assistants in the shop. So that was quite nice.
So
it was quite fun
there was
to have
conversation,
shoes,
people.
Yes. But he didn't want to have anything to do with fashion, and Simpsons of Piccadilly, which opened up a little bit after Lillywhites, they were doing fashion, and there was some pressure, I think, on my father to cover that as well, but he didn't want to. They had a branch in Princes Street in Edinburgh, they had a branch in Bournemouth, and they had briefly a branch in New York. It never quite took off, I think. And
what, in New York, you mean?
Well, the company is a company.
Oh.
And eventually they went public on the stock exchange because they needed to raise money for one of these new branches. And the shares were bought by Charles Forte. And Charles Forte had a big plan. He was going to buy up the whole of Piccadilly, the Criterion, Swan and Edgar's, the Palladium site, and all the rest of it. He was going to develop the whole area as a sort of entertainment centre.
Wow.
And of course, once you were publicly quoted, you couldn't stop people taking control of the business. And once he'd done that, my father hated it because he didn't approve of my father's old-fashioned ways. My father had been trained as an accountant. He was meticulous. He was a voluntary tax inspector too. He used to do all sorts of things. Very good with numbers. Indeed, a nice thing about my dad was that if you gave him 2 3-digit numbers, like it might be 511 and 726, he could multiply them in his head just like that.
Wow.
A great benefit to an accountant perhaps. Then calculators came in, and my dad, like myself, was useless at any kind of technological requirements. So when the calculators came out, everyone had the advantage over him. His brilliant mathematics was no good. But I inherited from him a command of mental arithmetic, so that when I took my entrance to Eton College, I got 100% in all the maths papers, arithmetic, algebra and geometry.
Wow.
And because of that, the school, Eton College, put me in the top available maths class. And I couldn't understand what they were talking about. We'd moved from mental arithmetic to something called problems, and A, B and C, which I was familiar with, had become Attlee, Bevan and Churchill, or alligators, bison and crocodiles, and I couldn't do it. So they put me in the class below that, and I came bottom of that too.
Oh dear.
And finally, Eton College wrote to the headmaster of my prep school and said, obviously this boy has been cheating. He couldn't have achieved those results on his own. And the headmaster of my prep school was so insulted that he never sent another boy to Eton. So I had inherited a part of my father's skills in the mathematical area, and we were both good chess players.
But now tell me, that saved you at Eton because you came across a lot of prejudice, you said, and antisemitism.
The Etonian boys were not the most tolerant, and like bullying everywhere, what bullies have to do is they have to find the weak point in the victim. And having found the weak point, they will hammer away at that.
Which was?
Well, in my case, it was probably that I was Jewish. There were very few Jews at Eton, and I was told I didn't have to go to chapel if I didn't want to. But if I hadn't gone to chapel, which was every day, I would have been even more of an outsider, so I did go to chapel. But if you have something that you're good at, then that can usually work to your favour against bullying.
And you were good at chess
I was good at jokes.
Oh, jokes?
Jokes and a sense of humour sometimes got you out of a mess. I was good at chess. I won the cup one year.
When you say jokes, was it like stand-up comedy? Or were you a raconteur even then?
I can give you only one example. That was from my prep school days. When in the dormitory one night, one of the boys, trying to insult me, said, "You're nothing but a vulgar fraction." To which I replied, "And you're nothing but a recurring decimal." And that was thought to be extremely witty, and so I lived off on that. So I was good at chess and I was good at writing, and I wrote pieces for the newspaper, the Eton College Chronicle sometimes. And the one teacher who appreciated my skill gave me top marks and all sorts of prizes and things. So that also redounded to my credit, I think.
Right. So after Eton, you went to...
I went to Balliol College in Oxford.
Right.
I took the examination at King's College in Cambridge, sitting for the scholarship. All I remembered was we had a general paper, and one of the questions in the general historical paper was about Queen Elizabeth I. And I didn't know any of the other questions, so I had to do that question. And I remember writing, Queen Elizabeth I only had 3 baths: when she was born, when she married, and when she died. And of course, she never married. And the provost of King's College, 3 days after my paper was put in, jumped off the roof of the chapel and killed himself. And I always assumed he'd read my piece on Elizabeth I, and he thought, if this is the standard of boys we're getting at the college these days, I'd better kill myself. Anyway, I went to Balliol. I was okay at Balliol, but I didn't get a particularly good degree. My bad luck at Balliol was being out of college. My rooms were 3 miles up the hill, and I used to bicycle there. My very first night in Oxford, I was stopped by the police for not having a light on my bicycle.
Oh.
Nothing changes.
Oh, dear.
And I was only in college for 1 year out of 3. And that was bad because you missed out on a lot of the social life, which happened in the college in the evenings. So I don't think I made the best of my time at Balliol, although we did a lot of drama.
Why were you not living in?
Well, they only had limited rooms.
Oh, I see.
And I was late applying or something.
Oh, I see, okay.
Then we still had national service in those days. I didn't want to waste 2 years of my life in the army. I had a cousin who said, "Oh, we can have you in the Duke of Wellington's light infantry. They'll be delighted to have an Etonian." But all I could find out about the Duke of Wellington's light infantry was that they marched faster than any other regiment, and I thought that wasn't for me. Anyway, I thought if I went abroad for further education, my call-up would be postponed, and that proved to be the case.
And you went to Iowa?
I went to the State University of Iowa and read drama.
Did someone recommend that was a special place to go?
It was a special place to go if you were a writer.
Ah.
They had then and still have the Writers' School at the State University of Iowa, and they had all the leading poets would turn up there.
Fantastic.
And if you could get your writing on the broadsheet, that would then be discussed by these eminent people. I finally got one of my poems on the broadsheet, but they never got round to discussing it because it was at the bottom of the list anyway. So a year in Iowa, I then travelled alone in my 1935 Nash to Los Angeles and San Francisco.
Right, well, we'll continue in part 3. Thank you very much, David.